years, Viera Giurova has been a European Commissioner with her portfolios covering justice, rule of law, gender equality. For the Europe Conversation, she tells me why she's worried about the state of European societies and how democratic elections aren't producing democratic governments. Viera Giurova, very welcome to the Europe Conversation. You're leaving after 10 years in Brussels, Vice President of the European Commission and Commissioner for Values and Transparency in your last portfolio. Before that, Justice, Consumer Affairs and Gender Equality.
Exactly. Thank you for having me here.
Yeah, it's been an incredible 10 years here in Brussels. And one of the things you've said before, well, not so long ago, was that authoritarianism is on the rise and the slippage of democratic values within Europe and across the world is strong. What did you mean by that?
It is I'm not a politologist, but I'm a practitioner, let's say, and I see when the correlation between increased level of uncertainty and anxiety in the society, the people who want somebody strong to take care of their destiny. And that's why they are more and more willing to elect the leaders who seem to be strong enough to take care, which means that there might be leaders who are strong enough and they respect the checks and balances, and there might be leaders who simply find democratic system as a nuisance, and they are switching off one safeguard after another. And I also say that democratic elections do not guarantee 100% that they will produce democrats.
What countries in the European Union are you most concerned about with this regard?
Technically speaking, of course, it's a long-term issue with Hungary because we switched on even the procedure under the so-called Article 7 because that is a definition of systemic breach of the rule of law, which means many safeguards have been switched off. So we have blocked some money to Hungary. I'm never happy when we are blocking the money which I see that ordinary people, the citizens, need to have for better education or a health system or roads and so on. So it's Hungary. It used to be Poland under the previous government, which started very difficult to understand reform of justice, and we have half of the member states where we see issues in the media sphere.
Italy and so on, in Slovakia.
For instance, yes, where we see the pressures from the side of politics on especially the public service media.
So what do you mean by that?
I mean that the public service media, which are so important in democratic system, especially in the era of disinformation, public service media should be the media where people can find trustworthy, fact-checked information, evidence-based truth. And if this evidence-based truth is becoming uncomfortable for the politicians, they are either decreasing the budget or nominating people willing to listen to political instructions to the management and to the boards. This is what I mean. And this is what we addressed in the Media Freedom Act, which will come into force next year, because we really believe that the public service media deserve a stronger protection.
Let's look at rule of law issues. We've seen the anti-LGBT laws in Hungary under the guise of child protection, but most people would say that this is actually much more sort of an attack on LGBT rights. We see an unprecedented case, the European Court of Justice, with 16 countries, the Commission, the Parliament, taking Hungary there. But what has happened is that there's similar laws in other countries taking place now, in Romania, Slovakia and potentially in Italy. And we have this, the sovereignty law, or the Sovereignty Protection Office in Hungary, which allows the government go after groups like Transparency International, a world-renowned organisation that's there to investigate corruption. So this has really exacerbated over the past 10 years. Why has the Commission and the EU not been able to defend basic principles, values and laws of the European Union?
What is shocking me, how ineffective it is, because you mentioned other states. Whenever there are first signals that in some other member state these Hungarian laws will inspire them, I always engage in a very early dialogue with them and asking them, could you please stop this or alter the drafts of the laws so that they are compliant with the EU law. This is exactly what I did in Bratislava when I spoke to Mr. Fico, because they wanted to adopt the law similar to the Hungarian law on the NGOs. And I told him, look, we already had to react in case of Hungary, and be sure we will have to do the same.
And did he listen to that? I mean,
Yes.
have they satisfactorily amended the laws? Because this law is essentially like the one in Georgia, the one where people
Yes.
have been protesting, where the EU has essentially suspended Georgia's accession process over.
And also
here you have a country within the EU doing likewise.
Indeed. What is a sad circumstance of that is that this is the pattern or example of Russian law.
But speaking of checks and balances in international law, we have a warrant for the arrest of Benjamin Netanyahu, Yoav Gallant, the former defense minister of Israel, and Mohammed Deif, military leader of Hamas. But Viktor Orban has said that he's going to invite Netanyahu to Budapest. What is your reaction to that? Because Netanyahu is wanted by the ICC, the EU, or Hungary is an EU member state and obviously a member of the ICC.
A minute ago I spoke about responsible politics and responsible politicians. Responsible politicians are aware of their international commitments. Hungary is the signatory, is the party to the International Court of Justice, or criminal court to be precise, and so there is a rule and it's based in the international law that the parties have to respect the decisions of the court. So it's a bounding decision of the International Criminal Court to everyone who is the signatory, including Hungary.
Around the issue of media freedom is, of course, and some of the areas that you've covered, of course, is disinformation, regulation of the social media companies. You've actually had an interaction, a confrontation yourself brought on by Elon Musk in the past around regulation. Now that he is part of the White House, does that make the EU's ability to deal with this, whether it's harm on the internet, disinformation, which impacts democracy, much more difficult?
How they organize work in the White House, it's purely the decision of President Trump and American administration. In Europe, we care about European things and European information space and security of Europeans. And when we see that the digital platforms are, without any effort to stop it, distributing crime, such as hate speech or terrorist content, extremist content, child pornography, we have to act. And we have now the law, which is called Digital Services Act, which imposes clear obligations on all the platforms to comply with that law and to guarantee that it is not a system for broad and massive distribution of criminal content.
And we've seen really a terrible rise in violence against women over the internet. We've seen statistics all across Europe. We see the first EU directive regarding domestic violence, but the essence of the position of rape was omitted because some member states, the Netherlands, Germany, France, didn't want a consent-based description of rape. Can you tell me, why is it so difficult to deal with this issue of domestic violence and violence against women?
Maybe one general remark expressing my feeling. There are stronger and stronger forces in the society which are dreaming about the 19th century system, when the women have secondary role. And I heard it from some current politicians, even in the European Parliament, that the best system was when the women just stayed in the kitchen, in bed and in the church.
Who says this in the European Parliament?
I will not name, but...
MEPs?
Yes, yes.
From certain member states or certain groups?
They are, of course, always from certain groups, certain member states. But I am rather surprised that I hear it from the people who I recognized as, I don't want to say progressivists, but reasonable, modern politicians.
Men, all of them?
All men. And even these men show the lack of self-confidence. I think that they simply don't like the competition. That suddenly they have strong women as competitors, and it takes more effort to keep high positions in such competition. But on your question, violence against women in Europe is a shameful story. Horrible statistical figures show that every third woman has experienced something like that, even some physical violence, including rape. We did not manage to harmonize the definition of rape, you are right. It was a bad moment for me because it was the reason why I proposed the directive, to have very serious, solid definition of rape and increased penalties for that.
But why is it that countries, France, Germany, the Netherlands, Hungary, were just dead against this?
You know what? There was a discussion about whether yes means yes or no means no. This elementary discussion, whether there should be explicit consent for the sexual activities and
because we saw in France the case of Giselle Pellicot.
Yeah, of course. Eye-opening.
Whose husband drugged her, and over 50 men went on trial.
I think that it was an uneasy thing for politicians from several member states to sell this back home.
Okay, well, Viera Giurova, Vice President or former Vice President of the European Commission, thank you very much for joining us on the Europe Conversation.
Thank you very much for your interest. Have a good day.